on the 4th of July suspended without pay and no change in sight. Now, we at this show, we all cheered when Kash Patel was nominated to be the director of the FBI. We covered it here on the show, but now it's been months and the whistleblowers still haven't been made whole. So at this point, we must start asking hard questions. We can go back to December 9th when Kash Patel posted this on X, saying, "I just wrapped up a wonderful meeting with Chairman Chuck Grassley. I share his love for government transparency and whistleblower protection." So for more, let's go ahead and bring in FBI whistleblower Steve Friend. He's also the host of the American Radicals podcast, and Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker. So the Steves are here with me today to cover what is a very important topic. But Steve Friend, I want to start with you because it feels like the whistleblower protection is kind of an oxymoron right now.
It absolutely is. I mean, whistleblower protection is tantamount to gun laws. The only people who actually obey them are law-abiding good people. But apparently the demons who work within the federal organizations like the FBI and the DOJ and all across all of our bureaucracies, they're never held accountable. So why would they ever subscribe to having to uphold their end of the bargain? You can see no greater examples than my friends like Marcus Allen, Garret O'Boyle, Phil Kennedy, Kyle Seraphin, and others who are not as prominent and public as we are, the suspendables, who have been indefinitely suspended, unpaid for years on end, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be any sort of resolution in the near future.
So, Baker, how do we get here? How have we gotten through the Christopher Wray FBI? And we now have a Trump administration that is led now by FBI Director Kash Patel. How do we get here at this point?
How did we get to this point? Well, that's a tough one because I can go at this how we got here from many different trails, many different avenues got us here. But the simplest and most stark reminder for all of us is that the cult of the FBI still exists, and the cult of the FBI has not been cleaned out yet. You don't get to be an agent of change or a deep state disruptor by coming in and just becoming the new cult leader. And that's what it feels like. Now, look, at the very beginning of this new Trump administration, we were cheering for the nominations of Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. When they were confirmed, we applauded, we gave them a standing ovation. And the guys in the suspendables heard directly from Kash. And, he told them via text or private message that, look, I couldn't have done this without you. And then all of a sudden, they've been abandoned. So how did we get here? I don't know. We're not there yet. We certainly aren't where we should be, which is clear restoration for these guys. And not only restoration, but they need to be acknowledged for the patriotism of actually being the men of character that we expect federal agents to be.
Friend, I remember when we had you on the show while Kash was going through his nomination process, and you shared a story with us about how Kash himself donated $5,000 to you and your family, and he didn't even want the credit or recognition for it. I feel like there was no greater champion of Kash at that point in time than you and the rest of the suspendables.
Yeah, his foundation, Fight with Kash, reached out to me, and Kash himself, as a representative there, being on the top of the line, reached out and was able to offer that to my family heading into the holidays. It was extremely generous, and he very specifically said he didn't want to have any sort of credit for it. This was just something that he believed in to support whistleblowers, guys who would come forward for the right reasons at the right time and actually adhere to their oath of office. And like you and like Steve Baker, I was waving pom-poms. I believe that we got our #1 draft choice. I still believe that. I would like to have seen maybe a difference in strategy as he's entered in as the director of the FBI, maybe going in with more of a shock and awe rather than winning hearts and minds. I think that the presupposition that maybe he and Dan Bongino went in with was that there was just a lot of good men and women of the FBI, and they just needed to have their default settings reset so that they could go back to rigorous obedience to the Constitution. And I think that was maybe a foolish assumption to have, because really, what do you know about people within the FBI, particularly those at the Hoover Building, who are going to surround you on a daily basis? And that is, they're people who have never said no to a bad idea, people who were gleefully abusing their rights and powers as sworn law enforcement officers, or at the very least were putting their head down and just following orders. And none of those are acceptable. So I think in the time that we've had now, which has been in excess of 4 months, we've gotten a pretty good sample size. And I'm really disappointed that we haven't seen the institutional changes. And then just from a personal matter, like my friend Garret O'Boyle exceeded now 1,000 days of unpaid indefinite suspension last weekend on Sunday. And this is a guy that the FBI actually investigated and adjudicated that he did not do anything wrong. And Kash Patel's been the director for 120 plus days, so he owns somewhere in the area of 12% of Garret O'Boyle's suspension time. A wave of a pen could easily resolve that situation, at least get him back on the payroll. The man has 4 small children, and he's in a situation right now where, because he is an employee of the FBI, unpaid of course, he needs their permission to seek outside employment, and they have stopped that from happening for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, Baker, we know Joe Hanneman wrote about the FBI whistleblower, about Garret O'Boyle himself in the 1,400 days that he has now been suspended. And he was saying how he recalls clarity, how Patel promised to fix the unjust suspension that he was nominated for FBI director back in November of 2024. O'Boyle said that he was told that he would be brought back to the FBI, have his security clearance restored, and be provided more than 140 weeks of back pay. There's so much in Joe Hanneman's piece about that. But just speak on this a little bit more about just Garret O'Boyle in general.
Well, this is the lowest hanging fruit that Patel could reach up and grab that would return him to favor with the 80 million people that voted for President Trump, to actually provide restoration to the likes of Garret O'Boyle, to Steve Friend. I mean, honestly, we're talking about a couple of Boy Scouts here. So we're not talking about what this new narrative that's being fostered and leaked by somebody inside the Hoover building that, oh, there's additional character issues inside of their files. Well, really? Well, then show us them. And then beyond that, let's talk about the character issues of all 35,000 employees of the FBI if we're going to do that. There's none of us without sin. There's none of us that don't have character flaws. And there's probably nobody that doesn't have something negative in their file, except maybe Garret O'Boyle and Steve Friend. So this is, as I said, it's low-hanging fruit. This is not something that was going to take months and months to work out and figure out and analyze. This was something that Kash Patel, as Steve said, could have done with a stroke of a pen and restored these guys, give them their back pay, given them a position if they wanted to come back to work. I know not all of the suspendables want to come back to work. Kyle doesn't. I don't believe that he wants to work for the agency again. But if they do, then bring them into a position where, my Lord, we're set up a division where whistleblowers are protected the way that they're supposed to be, and have these guys oversee that for the agency and maybe for all of the federal agencies.
Friend, I have to get your take on the character issues, right? Because we were talking before when you were on the show, and Ed Martin went on the Brianna Morello show and was saying, hey, we need you guys to come back. We're going to make this happen. We're going to make sure that the FBI whistleblowers get hired back. And then, character issues just come out of the woodwork, out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, you and others have character issues. What's your response to this?
It's sort of serendipity, I guess, for people who want to prevent any sort of adjudication of the process to go forward, because this message has gone out there that myself and Garret O'Boyle and all of us, there's 24 of us out there, that we all just happen to have character issues. But the problem is that the files that they have been accumulated that have all the derogatory information that the FBI conducted these investigations have already been presented to our attorneys. And our attorneys have reviewed them, and at no point in those files did they mention anything about character issues, which would mean that they somehow uncovered character issues after removing us from the office. So I think it's pretty convenient for them. And what it basically boils down to is something very simple. They need to actually own the fact that they do not want to bring us back. If that's true, it's their shop, it's their decision. But they need to be transparent with the American people and with us specifically and say, look, we do not believe that you have a position here. Let's take Garret O'Boyle, since he's a neutral person here. He's not really on the panel. Garret O'Boyle has been removed for 1,005 days. They owe him back pay for 1,005 days. And then they owe him the rest of his career, because his career prospects are basically nothing at this point, because they unjustifiably revoked his security clearance. And then I think we need to tack on some punitive damages because of the fact that the FBI opened up criminal investigations that he learned about subsequently, where they were subpoenaing his wife's cell phone information. So I'll start the bidding. You don't want Garret O'Boyle back in any position. You don't want him to work cases. You don't want him to oversee some sort of whistleblower division within the FBI. How does $10 million sound? And then he can just go away and he can actually have a bookend to this point and move on with his life. Because right now, the man sits in limbo printing T-shirts for people for a few dollars here and there so that he can maybe put some food on the table. This is just wholly unacceptable in the era that we are in, particularly because Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Donald Trump are in power right now, and Garret O'Boyle presents somebody who you would think would be their ideological fellow traveler, whereas Marcus Allen was against the Joe Biden administration from their perspective, and they brought him back. So I guess from our perspective now, we basically have to say that Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Christopher Wray treated whistleblowers better than Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, and Kash Patel.
We are rooting for Kash Patel and everybody at the Bureau to do the right thing. That's why we're talking about this right now. But Baker, we know that Rebecca Zelko, our reporter here at Blaze News, has a story that is going to come out, I believe on Monday, that is also looking into the FBI. And I want to go ahead and pull up a quote from FBI whistleblower Marcus Allen, who will be quoted in this story. We have a preview of it, who says that attempts to salvage the FBI are a fool's errand. Its reputation is damaged beyond repair. It has lost the public trust and proven itself to be an enemy of the American people and rightfully elected American government. Again, that is with at Pray with Marcus on X there. Marcus Allen, FBI whistleblower. Steve, your thoughts on just the fact that he is saying that the FBI is proven to be an enemy of the American people and that nothing has changed, to Steve Friend's point.
Right. Our good friend, J. Michael Waller, who's been on this show, he's been a contributor in all of our lives over the last few years. Steve Friend, Kyle Seraphin, et cetera. In his book, Big Intel, which came out last year, this book breaks down why this, as he calls it, the J. Edgar Hoover cult of the FBI is irredeemable, and it has to be busted up. It has to be broken into multiple divisions. It cannot be reformed from the inside. You can't, as I mentioned earlier, you can't take 35,000 people already worshiping at the altar of the Hoover building and then suddenly change their hearts and minds. You know, this is like I love that example that Steve gave earlier. This is like nation building. You can't change hearts and minds in that manner. You can't suddenly go into another culture that's completely different than ours and then teach them how to be a democracy. Well, that's the same thing. Patel and Bongino have gone into this cult like environment, and they can't change the cult from the inside. It has to be disrupted. It has to be broken apart, and people have to be sent home. You're not going to change the hearts and minds of these individuals that basically are doing nothing more than, let's just say that they're just protecting their paychecks. It's beyond that. We know that it's an extremely high percentage of the FBI's rank and file employees, including the special agents, are actually there figuring out how they can disrupt and how they can thwart the Trump administration's agenda going forward. And this is their hearts and mind. And so that's not going to be changed without sending these people home. And look, we don't need a federal agency that's carrying guns like this. I've always been an advocate for a federal investigative agency because with federal funds, it's needed. It's bigger. It's better. They will have more research dollars, more ability to exploit the science of forensic science, those sort of things that the FBI already does well. But they don't need to be carrying guns. They don't need to be coming to your state and to your hometown to arrest you or SWAT you. They need to be in contact with your local police department, your local sheriff's department, present the evidence of a crime to them, and then let that officer locally in your community who's elected by your community decide how and if they're going to approach your home and arrest you.
Steve Friend, I need to get your reaction to that because attempts to salvage the FBI are a fool's errand. Its reputation is damaged beyond repair. Your thoughts?
Couldn't have said it better myself from Marcus's standpoint. Look, Marcus was the only whistleblower of the bunch who was able to negotiate some sort of a settlement with the FBI. He did that 1 year ago, 12 months ago, and they arranged for him to come back on paper and then immediately resign, reinstate his security clearance, and then give him all of his back pay. Yesterday, he received the back pay. 12 months elapsed over 2 different presidential administrations in order for this institution, because the institution is forever. It doesn't really matter who's at the top of the letterhead. It doesn't matter who the elected president is or the appointed FBI director. The institution goes forever. And the worst thing that you can do if you're an FBI agent or professional staff is embarrass the Bureau. And that's exactly how they view all of the whistleblowers in this case. People who came forward with a reasonable concern. It doesn't have to be right. The letter of the law, 5 U.S.C. 2303, does not say you have to be right. It just says you have to be reasonable. You have to have a reasonable concern of waste, fraud, abuse, risk of public safety, violation of rule, policy, procedure. We all did that because we're system idealists. We weren't interested in being system disruptors. We wanted the policy, the law to be followed, and at least have an assessment of that, and then we would go back to doing our jobs. But we embarrassed the Bureau. We embarrassed the people on the inside because we highlighted the fact that they were unwilling to step forward because they had seen those things as well. And they wanted to just do the Police Battalion 101, put their head down, and just follow orders. The entire institution has been weighed, measured, and found wanting, particularly over the last 2.5 years, as examples of the way that it's treated whistleblowers and the way that it's treated the American people, where it is targeting them and using the law not as a shield to protect them against fraud and force, but rather as a sword to go after them because they present an opportunity for the bureaucracy to grow in capabilities and funding and personnel and manpower. And that has been abused by this agency. And I've written about what Steve Baker discussed, how the FBI should, if it is going to exist, have no firepower whatsoever, take the teeth out of the attack dog, force them to work through the doctrine of the lesser magistrate to empower local law enforcement. And if we are in fact going to keep this institution and not shatter it to 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind, that is the only way that that can happen.
All right, Steves. Don't go anywhere. We're going to continue this conversation on the other side. We're going to bring in one of our FBI agents, Agent Shady Tally Bradley. You might remember her. She was involved with Congressman Corey Mills in our stories about him that are currently up at theblaze.com. We'll get into some updates right after this. Well, there's a problem going on right now, and we know it's because family farms are shutting down because all the meat in the grocery store is coming from overseas. 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef on U.S. shelves is imported, and most people don't even know that that's happening right now. So go to goodranchers.com because it's not just about buying meat. It's actually about supporting American ranchers and getting top-tier quality, knowing where your meat comes from. Good Ranchers only sells meat that's 100% born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, and you'll be able to taste the difference. We're talking about the 4th of July. It's right around the corner. So celebrate America's birthday with 100% American meat. And if you subscribe today, you can get your free pick of meat for life. You can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box for the lifetime of your subscription. Plus, when you use the code Jill at checkout, you'll get an extra $40 off. So visit goodranchers.com to shop American meat that you can trust. It's Good Ranchers, American meat delivered.